My name is Melissa. I grew up in a town outside of Philadelphia and grew up as a normal kid, 5 years old, playing with my friends. I played with Barbies, had Barbie, marrying G.I. Joe. It was all great things. Had a lot of friends, played sports. But there was another side that the outside world didn't see. I was touching the corners of tables, walking in and out of doorways, staring at objects for minutes on end, doing things in even numbers that my parents saw. And I remember specifically one day hearing someone say it was weird. Now, when you're young, you get away with doing things like talking to imaginary friends, so I figured this was okay. But as I got into grade school, people started noticing a little bit these behaviors. I had this excessive worry that something bad was going to happen, that I had to control the world because I get these physical pains, and the only way to control the world was to do these compulsions. And to me, it made sense, but to everyone else, it didn't. To family members, it didn't. It was like, she just wants attention, So going through grade school was hard. I did experience a teeny bit of bullying where I came off as annoying because when I couldn't do these compulsions, as I would call them, these behaviors, there was a lot of energy I had. And it was hard because I wanted to fit in so bad, trying to hide behind this front of trying to be popular and please people, losing sight of who I was. I was finally diagnosed with something called obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm thinking, all right, it's cleaning, I'll wash my hands a million times, everything will be fine. I didn't realize that OCD affected people a lot differently. I didn't realize that there was a spectrum of mental health that wasn't talked about because it was so embarrassing, there was such a stigma. So now I'm seeing a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and all I have is this extreme realization and this scenery in my head of padded walls and restraints and, people running around yelling things that were obscene, that people looked at them differently. And I didn't know how to feel. I knew I had this diagnosis, so when I went to high school, I had to live behind this external and internal life. If you saw me on the outside, my life looked great. I played sports, I smiled all the time. Even the people that made fun of me, I was still saying hi to. I was involved in everything at school. But that internal life was so different. I hated myself. I called myself names every day. Hearing my family and my parents say they're afraid for your future. Then literally losing interest in the things I loved, getting irritable, punching holes in the walls, having this overbearing energy of feeling like I was a no one, but then also having this anxiety that I had to save the world somehow, which I didn't know that was attributed to OCD, having control. I was then diagnosed with depression. I'm 15 years old, have 2 diagnoses of OCD and depression. And people are starting to notice that I'm going to the counseling center more. I had this kid every day that bullied me, knocking my books down, calling me names, not knowing that behind this happy face was this girl that was struggling and trying to find her way and hide behind this front. So one day things got really bad. He made fun of me in front of a group of people, and I went home. And I had these thoughts, and they weren't, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're annoying. They were, what's the point of living? Why am I here? I'm a no one. I'm never gonna be anyone. And as I'm looking out my bedroom window, suicide crossed my mind. Ending all the pain crossed my mind because, yeah, there were peers out there that said hi to me and smiled, but putting this front on and trying to hide my OCD and depression, not dealing with it, letting things build up, not admitting that I was battling something, which then led me to not getting help and taking it seriously, everything just built up and I completely exploded and had this mindset that ending my pain would be the only way. Something amazing happened. I had a peer who noticed that things were going on, and she came up to my room. She was the girl that drove me home. She asked me one question that I think saved my life. And it wasn't what she asked, it was how she asked. Are you okay? Basically, she took my hand. And I asked her to keep it a secret, but knowing when your friend or someone's going through something, you have to speak up. And she went to my mom. And that's when I started getting help. Yes, I was in a psychiatric hospital. Yes, I thought about padded walls and restraints. But guess what? When I was there, it wasn't like that. I was surrounded by 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds struggling with that internal and external life. And all of them didn't have a diagnosis. But they did have that external life because they were so afraid of what their peers were going to say and teachers were going to say because they were struggling so much. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone, the first time I felt like some sense of hope, knowing I had a purpose in life. Yes, I had to go back to high school. Yes, people were whispering. But I didn't want to be that girl that in 10 years at my reunion, people looked at me like that was the girl that wanted to take her life because things were so bad. I knew I had to start a conversation somehow, but I also knew I had to push through. I learned to cope. I started dealing with my OCD and depression, getting help, realizing that it didn't define me, that I could play sports, that I could have friends, that I could have this life. But that led me to understand that other people had stories too, and that they were so afraid that they were hiding as well. So when I got to college, that's when I started doing volunteer work. And everything was going so good. You know, I had this run-walk event, raising money. I was on the radio telling my story. People were coming to me saying, wow, it's amazing what you're doing. The first time I felt like I had purpose. And again, I wasn't alone. But then something else happened. I'm doing so well, and then my parents get divorced. And this triggers my depression, my OCD, this anxiety. And I sat there. And I can tell you that I felt lifeless, and I felt like nothing could get better. But guess what? I also had the tools that I learned because a conversation of mental health was started for me a long time ago. And that is why speaking is so important. That is why it is so important that I share my story, because when I get thousands and thousands of messages from youth and adults that I speak to saying, I finally feel like I'm not alone. I finally feel like I have a purpose and that I can get through all these things I'm going through. That is when I knew that my story mattered. That is when I knew that yes, bad things are gonna happen. Yes, I sit here today and I still battle things, but I know I have tools. I know I have support. And I know I have a story, just as everyone else does. And if I can sit here and share my story to help others, I know that is the purpose in my life. If I can let people know they matter and that they can make a difference in this world. And if that is why I'm here, then I'm ready for it, and I'm ready to continue that. But we need to start this conversation in mental health, because I stand here today knowing, seeing the faces of youth, seeing the faces of people when we start that conversation, and seeing that little bit of hope that we didn't think was there.